You once at one point said what we should have been aiming for, and what we should be aiming for at this point, is a security structure that's based on three pillars: the United States, a more or less unified Europe, and Russia. In other words, I think what you're saying is something of a post-Cold War security architecture that really reflects post-Cold War realities and not what had prevailed during the Cold War. And then you said, this was very interesting, we never tested Putin. Our policy never tested Putin to see whether he was really committed to a different type of relationship. That's an interesting thought. What exactly
did I have in mind?
What exactly do you have in mind?
No, this goes back to the early years of the Bush administration. And I'm not talking about the meeting in Slovenia where the president looked into Putin's eyes. But after 9/11, and clearly Putin reached out to the United States at that point because he thought that in fact we did have a common interest in dealing with international terrorism. In his mind, Russia had been suffering from this for some time. He would have pointed to Chechnya. Of course, we always had a different sort of perception of what was happening in Chechnya, but he wanted to reach out. And we did a number of things, or at least on the rhetorical level, immediately after 9/11. But the question really was, what type of assistance were we prepared to receive from Russia in dealing with Afghanistan? How were we going to run relations in this NATO-Russia Council that was set up? There were times in the early years in the Afghan struggle where the Russians came to us offering certain types of assistance, strategic airlift, for example. They offered us in 2002 or 2003, I believe, help in search and rescue for American soldiers that might be wounded in Afghanistan. And instead of testing them, saying, yes, we could use strategic airlift, we will provide facilities for you to bring your planes and supplies into Bagram in Afghanistan. Or we think, yes, we ought to try to see whether we can work together on search and rescue. We rebuffed the Russians. And we rebuffed them in part because we didn't trust them entirely. I think, again, efforts where they reached out where we could have reciprocated or at least replied in a more positive way. Now, the point that I would have made back then is that the United States, certainly in 2000, 2001, was much more powerful than Russia was. If you looked at our economic growth, our military, our influence around the world, and we could have, in a sense, taken a risk to see how far we could move in with Russia in building a more cooperative relationship. If it turned out that the Russians were dealing in bad faith, it was easy enough for us to walk this back and not suffer a great deal of loss. So the problem we had is that, in a sense, we never invested the $100,000 in a relationship with Russia to see if we could make $1 million or $10 million at the end, because we didn't want to take that chance. I think that was a mistake.